Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com.
Hey, what's up, guys? Just getting home from Old Homestead, and been a pretty productive week already this week. In the past few weeks, we've done a lot of bottling, introduced bottled a new flavor, which is English toffee, finished up an orange juice-based gin, working on a new liqueur to go along with the 9-herb charm, which I'm really excited about. It's kind of a secret project, so I can't tell you the ingredients yet, and who knows if it'll even work, right? That's the way some of this stuff works when it gets conceptualized. It's just an idea, you know, floating around in Plato's cave, a realm of forms, and we'll see if it can take shape, right? So just because you imagine a chair doesn't mean you're going to make a chair, or make a good chair, as it were. What else? So I'm actually getting ready to do an aquavit there as well. Very, very small runs of aquavit. You know, aquavit's not a big seller, but it makes some of the best Bloody Marys in the world, and it's going to have some really cool ingredients in it. Will be made with our base, or not our base, but our actual white sunshine. So some of those roasty grilled notes will kind of come through with that sunflower into that aquavit, which of course caraway, coriander, and dill based. Probably gonna play around with some black truffle mushrooms. It's gonna be a lot of fun to play around with that one. So lots of cool stuff going on at Old Homestead, and get out there and check it out. Support the tasting room. It looks like we're probably going to try to look at Indiana distribution sometime in the new year. I've got so many things lined up to come out next year. A lot of sunshines that don't get released as white spirits, but get just basically barrel rested, will be out next year at some point in time. And it's hard to put it all in the words and categorize everything that we're really doing. But update, the almanac is ready to print. As soon as it's printed and it's to us, it'll be available for you guys to order for 2026. The 2026 Practical Distillers and Alchemist Almanac might actually end up in your hands in October or November this year, as opposed to after the beginning of the new year, which would be phenomenal, presuming that it doesn't get lost in the mail as it did last time. So really excited about that. Also working on another little book. To be fair, it'll probably end up in the 2027 Almanac. It's called Advice for Sovereign Distillers. It's based on, there used to be these pamphlets that anonymous people, for obvious reasons, would put out called Advice for Kings. And it was the idea of good kingship and the things that you do. So this will be, think of it as a follow-up to the Alchemist Cabinet Volume 1 and the Black Forest Method. But instead of being so strict on methodology and recipes, biography stuff like that, this will be much more in tune with, if you remember a while back I did a video about people weren't making so many mistakes, so many faults with distillation, but their intention and their discernment with distilling was where things were coming up short, right? How alive a spirit was. This will be the actual, call it alchemical, call it magical philosophy behind what I do. It's not going to appeal to everybody. I know that. It doesn't have to. I don't care if it does or not. But what I'm thinking about doing is having a limited run, special edition run of maybe 50 books made in some kind of unique, interesting format, maybe with something a little extra to it. The extra thing not going into the 2027 Almanac, but there's just been a limited run of books for people who might really be interested in those sort of alchemical, magical, spiritual philosophies of distillation. You'd have to really be into what I do to like this, and I know that it's not going to be for a wider audience, and it doesn't have to be. I don't need it to be. This is special for the people who motivate me, inspire me, and keep me moving. So if there's any interest in that, let me know down in the comments below. If not, then whatever, maybe it just ends up in the almanac. But I can rest assured that whatever I print of them, if I do make it a special edition book, say it's 50 copies, it's only ever going to be 50 copies. It's never going to get done, and I'll hand number them and do all that stuff, sign them, etc. But anyways, let's get into some questions. That's what we're here for, is to answer your questions about the art of distillation, whether it be professional or amateur distillation. In regards to distilling of spirits, making of tinctures, the making of essences, the making of perfumes, etc. Send me your questions, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, social media and or YouTube comments below, and I'll do my best to answer your question, guys. So first up, from Richard, I think I sent this to the wrong email last time. I'm sure this question's been asked before. So the last couple of all grains I put together have started fermenting before I even pitched the yeast. There are malted grains in these ferments. I clean all my fermenters well. I know wild yeast is everywhere, but I've also been storing tomatoes to finish ripening in that area. Could that be what's causing the fermentation startup? Further note, I've mainly been using yeast logs and FP1 firm solutions and Kveik Voss for most of my fermentations. A little long-winded, I know. P.S. Here's a picture of the upgrade that Wayne did for me. Apparently the second one in existence. Costa Rican special. Yep. So it's a modification to a Weaver that Wayne did, and of course I didn't print the whole thing, but basically copper line arm, etc. So huge modification to a Weaver football, still Lombardi, still whatever you want to call them. Okay, so on to your question about yeast. First of all, I would say, what are your fermenters made out of, right? Because if they're made out of plastic or glass or stainless or something of that nature, pretty easy to keep clean. If they're wooden at all, they're very hard to get sterilized, right? Just think about this for a minute. One of the reasons I love my Oak X whiskey barrels for fermentation at Old Homestead, and one of the reasons I love them at home, was that whole barrel basically becomes a yeast log. If I don't want to pitch yeast, I don't have to. It doesn't matter how well I sterilize that wooden barrel. Never, ever, ever going to get that yeast out of there, right? It's a giant living yeast log. It is an ingredient and a vessel for fermentation. If it's plastic, over time you'll get scratches in there. It gets a little harder to clean up because the stuff gets down in those gouges in the plastic. But it sounds like you have your cleaning protocol under control from what you're saying here. The tomatoes are a very likely source of wild yeast, and that could be what's causing it. It could be that there's yeast on your malted grains, and depending on your temperature that you're putting your malted grains in, you may not be knocking that down enough before you actually pitch your actual yeast to keep that under control, right? So in other words, that yeast that's on that malted grain is getting a chance to take off before you get it cooled off enough to pitch your selected yeast strain. Depending on what malts they are and whether or not you're using those for enzymatic action, right? If you're using them for enzymatic action, you can go in at a higher temperature and kill that yeast off, basically pasteurize it, right? Not sterilize it, but pasteurize it, say 155, 165, somewhere in there. If you're using them for enzymes, then you can't do that, right? There's a unique thing happening there for sure that plays into the microflora of what you're producing. My guess, however, is, and I'm not going to say it's not the tomatoes causing it, but my guess is the two strains that you mentioned were the that you use the FP1 from Firm Solutions and the Kveik Voss for most of your fermentations. Now, I don't know if you're doing open top or closed top fermentations. I don't know any of that information. I don't know what the environment is like that you're in, if it's a wood frame building that you're in, a lot of wood around, etc. Those are both really, 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 really strong yeast strains. And so once they're in the environment, buddy, they are in the environment, especially because they tend to both be killer strains. In other words, they're going to take over everything else really, really easily. So my guess is that you just have those yeast strains in the environment, and that's probably what's kicking off. If it's the tomatoes causing it, and they could be a vector, they may just be harboring those two yeast strains as well. It may not even be a wild yeast. It may be one of those two yeast strains. So there's a few things to think about there for sure. And if you need more clarification, or you want to give me more of an idea of what the environmental factors are and those sort of things, I can try to go a little deeper in depth into that. But I would say from there you can probably fairly well dissect what you need to dissect as far as what's probably happening. So let's see what else we got here. So Jeffrey says, "Hey Alan, love your talking head videos. I'm very excited that your almanac is almost done on time this year." Dude, I cannot explain to you how excited I am that we almost got this thing out in the time frame I wanted to get it out in. I wanted to have it in y'all's hands by October 1st, which is the date that I'm recording this video. Also my beautiful wife Kimberly's birthday, so everybody be sure to tell her happy birthday. If it wasn't for her, I couldn't do any of this stuff. She keeps me organized and alive and fed and encourages me to bathe on a regular basis. So all the love in the world to my beautiful wife, because she is amazing and puts up and has put up with a lot of bullshit from me over the years. But I can't explain to you how excited I am to actually have this almanac come out ahead of time, right? So you guys have access to the entirety of the calendar, the entirety of the information. Not to mention the fact that I spent a huge amount of time drawing diagrams, laying out the 30 or 40 pages of astrological information. You know, when you look at the old Farmer's Almanac or a Farmer's Almanac, it always has those pulp paper pages that have all the astrological information that repeats basically short of the dates every year. I sat down and I got all that done. I don't ever have to write it again, right? I just get to modify it, which is a huge relief. it's, you know, there's still formatting things that I want to do differently maybe in the future. And it will change over time, without a doubt, as all things do as they evolve. But to be able to get it out almost in time, man, it's a big win. Because last year and the year before, I'll tell you, the year before we knew it was going to be late because I didn't start on it until the new year. Last year, it was actually done and would have been in everybody's hands at least by February. But it got lost in shipping twice. And it took months to get it out. And I'll tell you, there's nothing worse than being a creative person and not stifling yourself, but being stifled because of things that are out of your control. There were times that, for me, that's just soul crushing. It just feels like you can't move on to the next thing because the old thing's not out there and it's not done yet. And I don't ever want to have to do that again. I did not like or appreciate that. But anyways, let me move on here. So I have two questions. Question one. So I use a lot of rice in my projects, but it's always been long grain white rice. I was rewatching some of your old videos and you mentioned to not use jasmine rice because it never comes out quite right. Well, I happened to acquire a decent quantity of wild rice and was wondering if you had any insights in using it. I assume the cook time will be longer and I might have to mill or crack it, wondering how the flavor might be different. So I have actually not used wild rice. That said, I love the flavor of wild rice. I would suspect that you would want to mill that, would be my guess. I don't think it's quite like regular rice. I don't even think they're the same species. I'm not entirely sure there. But my inclination would be to mill it. And if it were me, because it is so hard, I think I'd probably cook that in at the same temperature I would corn. Say 190, maybe not for as long, maybe for 15, 20 minutes. You know, you probably look at the box of directions for wild rice and have some idea of where it needs to land at, but I would think it would take a higher temperature. I really would, because of how hard of a grain that is. And I wonder if you could get those savory characters really carrying over with that wild rice. My brain immediately goes to using it for a base alcohol, for a gin or an aquavit, or maybe mixing that with a little bit of rye. That might be kind of cool. Or even the contrast of wheat might be interesting, like a red wheat. Like a red fife or something of that nature. Question 2. I've thought about how to put more local influence in rum. I was wondering if you can substitute a portion of your water and replace with seawater. I was thinking about 10%. Is there any reason this wouldn't work? Plus, I'm wanting to salt cure whatever the rum is going to age in. Maybe this could all tie in. So the salt curing is something you'll want to talk to Paul Mint of Key West First Legal Rum Distillery about. My experiment's not old enough yet to have any idea of what it's going to do one way, shape, form, or the other. Other than, you know, what I've tasted of his stuff, which I really do like. In terms of substituting a portion of your water and replace with seawater, if I remember right, and I could not begin to tell you what distillery it is in the Caribbean, but there is one of the distilleries, and maybe even historically there were more than one, that from time to time did use a proportion of seawater. Now, I don't remember how much, and I don't remember why they did it, but I bet if you check out Boston Apothecary and you dig through his rum papers, the various literature that he's republished from back in the day, you could probably find that information. I bet it's detailed there. If anybody has it, that dude, Stephen Schellenberger, certainly has that information at Boston Apothecary, and it'd be worth looking into for sure. So I think there's a few more questions here. I need to see, let's see how difficult they are, right? Because we're 13 minutes in, but what is the difference / benefit of agave inulin versus nectar? That's an interesting question, because to be honest with you, this is one I don't know the answer to, and one that I'm going to have to look into myself. I don't honestly know. I mean, it seems to me that my understanding would be that the agave syrup is actually from the cooked pinas that they press out, versus the nectar, I would imagine, being from the top of the plant, but I don't know that for sure. That's a good question. You've stumped me there. I'll have to see what I can find out about that and try to answer that again in the future questions. So But anyways, guys, I'm gonna wrap this up because the next email looks like it's a lengthy one, and it's gonna take me a minute to answer it, and so we don't need this to be a 30-minute video. I don't think anybody wants to watch my talking head for 30 minutes, and I certainly don't want to talk for 30 minutes straight. So I'll catch up with you soon. Keep an eye out for the 2026 Practical Distillers and Alchemist Almanac. Really, really proud of it. All that money goes to support me, my family, this channel, and what we do, right? So check out oldhomesteaddc.com. Keep up with Old Homestead. Come out and stay at the hotel. Listen, you can get as drunk as you want over there in the tasting room. As long as you can still crawl, you can make it back to your hotel room. Just don't get in your car, ever. All right. Love y'all. Later.